My first week in Florida, I would say, was the hottest week of my life, easily. I got there in the middle of July, so just about the worst time of the year to get to Florida. And, it's extremely hot, it's extremely humid, and it rains pretty frequently. So I was wet a lot of the time, hot a lot of the time, and that took a little adjusting too, but, really it wasn't that huge of an adjustment. Got into the swing of things pretty quickly, but polyester ties, very important. If you have silk ties, they're going to get destroyed in that rain, so having the right material for that was very helpful. Yeah, the Orlando mission is growing pretty quickly. When I was there, there were 3 new wards that were formed and a new stake that was formed. So right now in that mission there are 7 stakes and however many wards that is. And they have mostly English and Spanish. Those are the 2 primary languages that are spoken there, but there are also Portuguese missionaries that are called there and Haitian Creole missionaries that are called there, but there aren't any Portuguese or Creole wards or stakes or anything like that yet, so they're still working on that. You get a pretty interesting blend as far as cultures and religious practices in Orlando, because in the northern parts of the mission you're still kind of in the south where you have a lot of strong Southern Baptists, and very avid, very committed people of various Christian affiliations. But at the same time, you also have a lot of people coming from South Florida, so you have a lot of Hispanic people as well, so you have a lot of Catholics, and a lot of people who are just kind of open to listening to you, which is nice, to have that mix. Keeps things interesting. But there is a temple in Orlando that everyone recognizes. It's been there for about 20 years. And so if you bring up the Mormon temple or the big white building, pretty much everyone will know what you're talking about if you're in Orlando itself. Everyone confused us with the Jehovah's Witnesses. As soon as you start knocking on doors, it seems like everyone pretty much thinks that's who we are. And knocking on doors in general was pretty difficult because there are a lot of gated communities in Orlando. It's interesting, something I didn't really expect, where there are communities that literally you cannot get into unless you have a password or call in and actually know someone in there. And then once we started teaching people, it always seemed like the hardest of the commandments was the word of wisdom. A lot of coffee drinkers, a lot of smokers, a lot of tea drinkers. Didn't really have to deal with any alcoholics or anything like that, but it was definitely always a huge step of faith for people to give up those substances, and so we had to work through quite a bit of that. But if they're committed, they can get through it. I'd say the diversity is pretty unique, just because it's right in the middle of Florida, and also obviously Disney World is there. That's probably the first thing people ask about serving in Orlando, something connected to Disney World, and no, we didn't ever get to go. Because it was there, it's very transient. There are a lot of people who are there just for a year and a half, 2 years that are working for Disney, and so they don't stick around for very long. And so it's hard to find people who are really settled in Orlando and who are planning on staying in Orlando for a long time. And obviously just with tourism, there are I think 60 million people that visit Orlando each year. That's the average tourism rate, I guess. And so a lot of people you talk to, if you're just stopping them on the streets, don't even live there. And so I feel like a lot of the influence and a lot of the good that the missionaries in Orlando do is spread out, I guess. It's not always, just to people who are tied to Orlando and who are going to be tied to Orlando for a long time. I served in a city called Mineola, which is the only city in Central Florida that has hills, so that was exciting. Then I went to a city called Kissimmee, and then I was in New Smyrna Beach, and then I went to Windermere, which is where the temple is. It's the nicest part of Central Florida by far. Then I went to Apopka, and then I finished serving on the campus of UCF, the University of Central Florida. I am a huge fan of the way the work actually goes in the Orlando mission, because a lot of missions, it seems like, I don't know, I haven't experienced any of the other ones, but from the stories I hear, it seems like certain areas are just really, really difficult regardless of how hard you work to find people who are willing to listen. In a lot of areas, it's pretty easy. Things just kind of fall into place. And I know that those aren't completely universally true in any mission, but I definitely feel that where, at least in the areas I served, how hard I worked usually reflected pretty clearly in the success we had. And I mean, if you wanted to go and to teach people, then you could go and find and teach people. And if you weren't willing to put in the work and to have the faith and to be obedient, you know, and do all the classic missionary things that missionaries need to do, then you wouldn't have the success. And so I think that was really great for me, just to have the pretty strong correlation between the effort and the care and the love I put into the work and the actual results that came from it. And so I think that that's definitely one of the biggest perks to go into Orlando.